Ryland Leyton. How are you? Welcome to the podcast. I'm really excited about this conversation. I saw your profile, I did my homework, and it should be a very interesting conversation. So, with that said, Ryland, would you like to tell us a little about your story? How did you get into this Agilist world to the audience, and then we can go from there?
Sure. So I guess the way I landed in the agile space was kind of fun. I was at a company, and I'd been doing a lot of different things. I was kind of in the middle of and this was an in-house startup at a very big company, like it was a well-funded independent, and they. To steal a little thunder, I guess, they had fired all their BAs. They had fired all of them from another company. It was from a consulting company. It wasn't what they needed. And a buddy of mine who was working there had, when they discovered they needed BAs, he said, I knew Ryland. He was really good at this stuff. Why don't you give him a call? And they did. We met. They said, hey, you know a lot about requirements and doing solid work in that space. And we know a lot about Agile. Why don't you come work with us? And we'll come up with the right thing. Because that was the wrong thing. That thing we were doing before, that was the wrong thing. We want to do the right thing. So why don't we figure it out together? And I said, that sounds fantastic, Simon. How fast can I start? And it's just gone on great from there. I'd been in organizations where we had some training and it seemed really fascinating. I was looking forward to working in an agile way, but then they backed off. They just said that isn't going to work. And maybe we'll talk about this later. I think the reason they backed off was that agile transformation where they trained all of us and then backed away was IT only. Our product management partners and our internal customers and other groups, they hadn't been consulted. They weren't ready to go that way. So IT decided to change the direction of that. So that's kind of how I got started. And to tell you one more thing, I guess, it was going well. And this is about 10 years ago, I guess now. And I was kind of taking to it like a duck to water. I was really loving what I was doing. And at that time in the BA space, how do you make this transition to Agile? What's the BA's role? Scrum and most other frameworks don't specifically call out the BA as a position to play on the team. They aren't against it. They just don't specifically call it out, right? And everybody was saying, oh, well, we're just going to get rid of our BAs, or there is no BA here. And nobody knew what to do with that. And I gave, at an IIBA professional development day, I gave a 4-hour talk on moving from waterfall to agile, because one of the folks who was organizing the day said, you've been working on this, wanted to talk about it. I said I could do a training. They said, sure, take 4 hours. Wound up taking an extra couple of hours because I got through like half my material. And by the, it went gangbusters. It went really well. They kind of reorganized the day a little bit. Somebody fortunately had to cancel on them anyway. So there was a little open window. We extended. And a couple of weeks later, I was sitting around and I'd been starting to get questions from people following up that said, hey, I just have a quick question for you. What does my job need to change to now that I'm doing that? That's not a quick question. Sorry, it's not a 5-minute hallway question. So I kind of wound up writing a book because I said, I think I need to start the conversation on this and help people make this change. And also a little bit as a protective thing, because I was getting hit up for information by a lot of people. Like, I can't have this many one-off beginning conversations. And I started to feel this real passion to write this book. I said, guess I'm writing a book. Guess I've never had a desire to do it before. Couldn't have told you I wanted to. Suddenly I'm gonna.
That's great. So we're talking about one of your books, which is the Agile Business Analyst, Moving from Waterfall to Agile. Is this correct? There we go. We will put the link in the comments below so everyone is able to pick their copy. So then who would you recommend, or who would be the best audience for this book?
So somebody paid me a compliment about this that stuck. Like, if you're a BA or possibly another similar profession who has to go to an agile frame and you hear about it on Thursday, you could get my book on Friday and read it over the weekend or a long weekend, and you'd have a position to walk in with on Monday.
Oh, nice.
So that's the idea. I assume when I wrote it, you know a lot about the business analyst space. I don't need to educate you on that. If I need to, there are many other places to do that. It's already lots of other books. I wanted to show how you shift from doing waterfall work as a BA to agility. That's kind of the thing. I think it gives you a good grounding in that, a good foundation in it. And I think a couple of other audiences would be a product manager who's going agile, because the overlap there is huge. And similarly, the IIBA has expanded their agility offerings to the product ownership space, because product analysis is a form of business analysis, and being able to do it with discipline and technique and so forth is a core competency. So the IIBA has expanded into that area, I think, pretty effectively from what bit I've seen. And so for my book, that's one thing to help you get up on the cycles and how that's going to work for you. The cycles of agile development, whether it's whether it's more of a Scrum sprinting pattern, or whether it's a flow pattern, how to deal with either one, what artifacts. And I think the big deal is how your mindset. From our light conversations before we lit the session up, I have the feeling we would agree on the idea that it's great if you're doing the forms of agility as a place to start, but you have to get the mindset, how you see the world, how you look at problems, how you define what you're going to do, how you see learning and success, failure, how you change how you see the world is the powerful part of agility. The rest of it you can do without getting anything out of it after a while.
Got it. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. You mentioned briefly that the PM is kind of part of the business analyst role, right? So if I got it correctly, but I would like you to explain, like, what is the main difference from the BA, the PM, and the PO, and where does those roles fit into teams that are doing Scrum, for example?
Sure. When you say PM, do you mean the product manager or the project manager? The
product manager.
We're talking product space. Okay. So one of the things that I like to point out about this is it came up as a great example with a team that was going to SAFE as an example. They said, we're going to make all of our BAs into product owners, and our product managers are going to stay in the role they are, thinking more strategic. And I said, okay, that makes some sense, and I kind of understand where you're coming from. The key question I'm going to ask as I'm starting to coach with you is, do your new product owners, the folks you're putting in that role, will they have backlog authority? In other words, do they have the right to commit the team to action the way Scrum and SAFE say that's the role of the product owner? They make the decision about what's in the backlog, and that's their authority. They need to be able to use that authority in service of the product goals and the overall goals of the organization because of the scaling part of SAFE. And they said, I'm not sure. Let me think about that. I said, good, think about it. Get back to me. It's a really important question to know, and everyone's going to want to know also. That now a product owner has the right to commit the team to action and make decisions between two competing needs that you can't meet both of. Now they're going to do it collaboratively, but they need that authority and they need to be clear about who's got it. Went away for a week. They came back to me and they said, they'll have backlog authority. We're going to learn with this. We're going to see how it goes. We expect there'll be some growth and change for all the people involved. But yeah, they're the ones at the point where the work is getting done and they need to have that authority. Fantastic. We can work with that. Let's get going. So that's one of the distinctions that changes for this, for the BA, the PO, the PM. Typically when it's a product manager and a business analyst, your BA is helping the product manager create requirements, make things clearly expressed to the technical team, make sure we cover all of the other space things that have to be done. Like if you're lighting up a new product, can you bill for that product, collect revenue for it? Can you troubleshoot? Can you configure it? Can you turn it off when a customer no longer wants it? All of those things, the full life cycle of the product is something a BA is going to help think through. Product managers don't always have that responsibility. They're just supposed to get their vision implemented in the world, right? And the authority in that arrangement lives entirely with the product manager. When you go to Agile, it lives with that person who's right on them. So that was the big distinction. And I don't know about Scrum as much as I can talk about the scaling frameworks in SAFE in this case. The product managers were supposed to have the vision of things and kind of the big picture, and then it gets implemented down at product owner level. And the authority still lives down at the lower level, except for things that are like agreed to be big rocks at the scaling. We are having to all organize collectively to get this scaled thing done. So we have to acknowledge those needs are first, and we'll work out conflict. So I feel like those are some of the big differences. The roles are all focused a little differently from each other. The biggest one being, where does the authority lie? Some people call this who's got the D, who's got the decision, right? Who has the right to make a decision. And as long as that gets worked out, I think any of it can work just fine. My book is mostly about how a BA and a product manager collaborate, right? Because the PM is probably slotted into the PO role, with the BA helping with still persist all the analysis stuff and serve as a solid socket adapter, as it were, for the team. It causes less disruption of the team when there's a product manager change or product owner change, if there's a BA who's still responsible for all the artifacts.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, I threw a lot out there. If any of it was interesting and you want to pursue into it, feel free. I kind of went on a little.
Yeah, no, it sounds great. So I wanted to go back, jump back to your books, right? So we went through the Agile Business Analyst. Now I'm seeing that 13th of September 2019, we got in Amazon the book It's About Your Career. And this is kind of a shift, right? This has nothing to do, I will say, with the previous one. What was the trigger, or how did this got started, the idea to talk about this?
Yeah, it had more to do with it than you'd think. That's the funny part. So remember I talked about those hallway conversations that were happening? And a lot of them were, and I swear I wasn't thinking of this when I mentioned it, but like, what do I have to do differently on Monday? Or what do I have to do differently now that I'm working Agile was one of the things. The other conversation was, what does this mean for my career? How does this change who I am as a BA and how I'm going to work in the future? Or I'm applying for a job and they seem to want to know all about Agile. What do I even? And I kept having career conversations with again and again, like, even want to work that? Does it sound appealing to you? Let's talk about what it might look like. And I was constantly applying stuff I had used for myself. I know it's going to sound a little funny, but if you think about career planning and career goals, if you and I sat down to have a conversation and I said, well, where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years? Let's pretend you're a little more junior in your career because you've had a robust one. I'm sure you still have goals further out. But if we were talking about the kinds of things, let's say 5 years ago or 10 years ago for you, you might be talking aspirationally. I want to here and here and here. And I'm saying, okay, great. What are you going to do between now and there to make that happen? You don't have to keep the plan. You're not going to write down a plan and commit to it permanently for the next 10 years, unless you want to be a doctor or something where you're going to need that level of commit, right? Medical school and all the following. But for most other careers, you can have a lot of flexibility between here and there, wherever there. So I've been doing all of this stuff for myself, saying I want to do things I enjoy. Well, what do I enjoy? What am I passionate about? Because there are a lot of ways to do the thing I'm passionate about. So if this sounds like we were talking about needs, goals, vision, value, we are. And then if we're talking about, well, where do you want to be? That's your future state. And where are you now? What's the difference between now and where you want to be? What's the difference? What has to be accomplished to get you from here to there? Well, we just kind of talked about a problem statement and your current state and your future state. And then we've done analysis to shift between. And as a buddy of mine pointed out, well, you just kind of applied BA to your whole career space because everything I just said is kind of a big aspect. Look through one lens of business analysis, right? What do you have now? What is it you wish you had? What's the problem you're trying to solve? And how will you transition between, okay, let's set out some plans, requirements, and goals, right? Because you're going to travel distance of time between here and there. So I kept having those conversations and I was just using techniques that seemed pretty straightforward to me through my whole life. Actually, I mean, I've been using before I got into being a BA. And I said, I should write this down also because it seems like a lot of people don't apply this kind of thinking to their career. And the agility became a piece of it you may discover something along the way. Like if you want to be you decide you want to be a CFO and you want an accounting degree to help. You may discover after a while, you know what? I don't love all the responsibility of being a CFO, but I do love accounting. And I like the independence. Then I'm just CFO for me. I'm CFO in my own world. Okay, fantastic learning, very accomplishable, right? Let's do that. Someone else has to make you the CFO of their company, but you can be the chief of yours by deciding you are. If you're okay with that, let's go get started on it, or when you discover it, right? You might discover that along the way. You might discover that during an in or something. And that kind of happened to me. That's a lot of how my career got. Maybe we'll talk. I don't know. Not about, I was never a CBAP. I'm terrible with numbers that way. But that's how that book came about. I wanted to write. It was very much a passion project. And I said, you know what? I think I could probably help a lot of people with whom I will never get to meet them and I won't be in a room with them by putting this together and writing that down, giving them some good tools for feedback and conversations. And then there's one other piece I got to do with it, which was great. I do a lot of very informal management of people and teams. I don't generally have formal hard line responsibility. I get a lot of dotted line responsibility, which is fine. I'm cool. So I don't always get to pass on a lot of the life lessons where people invested in. So that book, I'm sorry, I got a busted arm here, so I can't use my right arm, which is why if you're watching this podcast, it's why you're seeing me weirdly gesture because I'm used to using my right hand and being able to easily gesture in a frame like this. And I can't seem to do that today. It's all messed up from having a drag out. So anyway, people invested in me over the period of, and they taught me some really big lessons. And I wanted a place to put that. So the book's got 3 sections. The first is kind of vision. What do you even want to do? Let's imagine your future. Let's imagine it with the most freedom you can have. In the sense of how do we define your goal in the broadest way possible? So you define, so the universe can present you with really fascinating ways that you didn't even know you were interested in to achieve that, like if what you love is, I'm picking this out of the air. If you love being a facilitator and an organizer group of folks, think of how many jobs in the world offer you that ability. Offer you that as a key piece of the work. It's not just facilitation, right? Scrum mastering gives you a lot of possibility for facilitating and helping groups do work better, right? Coaching, all kinds of things. There's all kinds of roles that do that. So, but if you'd said, I want to be a facilitator, your job space is pretty small. I like doing facilitation and it broadens out hugely. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And then part 2 is all about job hunting skills because there's a lot of opinions out there on how to do an interview well and what to look for in an interview and how to approach an interview. And I propose that you approach it collaboratively and hope that that works well. And if it doesn't, it teaches you a lot about who you just interviewed. If they can't approach an interview as a good conversation where you're trying to give information and receive, trying to figure out if this job is right for you and if you're right for them, because if you're offered the job that you think you're a terrible fit for, even though it might be good for you, you might not want that job. You might be leaving it faster than you wished. If you really think, I don't know why they're hiring me. I sound like a terrible fit for them, even though it's what I'm interested in. Culturally, we're just not a good fit, perhaps. And vice versa. That company, the interviewer, is looking at you the same way. They want to say, are you a good fit for here? And are we a place you're going to stick around? Is this going to be a good, collaborative, successful professional relationship? Those are things. And then interviewing well, which takes a lot of practice. And then that third part is all these lessons and gifts that I've been given and felt I wanted to pay forward pay back by sharing them forward. So that was it. It was a real passion art project of mine, and I'm glad I was able to get it out the door.
Nice. Thank you, Ryland. So related to this topic, I have many friends that just got to their first or second job, and then they stayed over there for 10, 15 years, right? When do you think, for all those looking at these that have been, I don't know, more than 2 or 3 years in a job, when do you think that you should start looking for something else?
That's a good question. And I don't feel like you have to leave a company to get your next job. I mean, in the United States, my view when I first entered that kind of workplace, because I pursued a couple of graduate degrees before I decided I don't want to do this anymore. I didn't finish any of them. I just said, this isn't what I want to do with my life. I discovered it's hard. My first real professional job wound up being at Bell South in Atlanta, Georgia. And that is a company, until it was reacquired by AT&T, that is a company that people could spend 20, 30 years with. And many of them were the people I worked with prior to that reacquisition together. And they had a lot of different jobs and they had all that tenure. There are a lot of pluses to staying with a company for that extended period of time, if that's what you do, if it meets your goals in whatever way, because you can have any number of goals that are met through your employment. And a lot of them may never be met through your employment and they're only done outside. So any number of things there. I guess the thing I would look at is, for me, I didn't expect to be a 20 or 30 year employee. I said, I see the people who do that. I think it's been great for them. I don't think I need to have more control over the variability of what happens. I knew I wanted to work in a lot of different ways. And I didn't expect it to that. So what I do with folks, including myself, when thinking about a job change, is I actually sit down and I write a very simple analysis. And it may sound funny, but I do this. And the sheets for this, by the way, even if you don't want to read the book, the worksheets for this are on my website, which, by the way, I know I'm going on a tangent for a minute here. The website is incredibly stale, but the worksheets are there. It's in the assets or documents space. You need to register with your email address, but I don't think I've used it to spam anybody in at least 5. So pretty safe. And if you want, Hector, if there's a way to do it through your website or through whatever for your listeners, I'm happy to give you the documents. But it's a worksheet, real straightforward. And it has on one side all the kinds of things like the salary I've got, relationship with my supervisor, trying to work in the frame, the relationship with my supervisor, my reputation at the company, the amount of travel I have, the vacation I have. So a lot of tangibles, and then those intangibles of the relationship. Is the company in an industry I want? Does it offer me advancement? Does it have education reimbursement? That's kind of like, does it have work-life balance? All kinds of stuff, whatever I could think of with a lot of spaces for you to fill in your own, okay? And then 3 columns. What I've got right now, very easy, right? With some idea towards what is it that you're not satisfied with? What is it you want? And then in the next column, what do I want? Or what would I say yes to is really what I say about it. Okay. And just to be clear, I don't mean this as winning the lottery. Nobody argues with winning the lottery. If someone offers you $1 million, you don't say no. So we're not asking that because that's probably not happening in your next job search, right? That's how I look at it. So realistically, what do you want? What would be great? You wouldn't, if somebody offered you this, you wouldn't turn it down. Whatever that is, okay? And you put that in your next column. And that helps you think about what you're missing and what you would want and what's negotiable and what isn't. If you have kids and you need flexibility, for that kind of thing, like to be able to pick them up from school or make sure you're there when they get home, that's a non-negotiable. You're going to need to interview about that. Salary might be very flexible to you in that case, et cetera, all through the list. And then when you're considering something, you just put it in the next column over. So you could kind of compare it. This is what I've got. This is what I thought I wanted. This is what I'm being offered or what this job has as at least on the table, what do I need to get it to do to say yes? And sometimes what you find from this has been me and other people I know. This job is fine. I just don't feel challenged right now. I'm bored. I'm just bored. My work's become very routine. But the truth is this job does everything I need it to do in terms of salary. I'm not finding better. I've got 10 years here. I've got great vacation, built up. I've got all kinds of things. Why don't I just find a project outside of work to involve myself in that's related to my professional life? I don't know, you go write a book or something, give a talk, anything like that. Get involved with your Scrum Alliance, get involved with Agile Alliance, get involved with your PA groups. Do something that's challenging to you and leave the job alone. It's fine. It'll turn up to change. How many times do we have a job that doesn't change in some significant way? Usually 6 months is my horizon. Something about every job I've ever had changed in 6 months, right? So if you're just bored right now, you need a way to be not bored for 6 months, okay? And especially if everything else works. That's one thing I found. I found that twice. And I just said, I'm not going to look for other work. I'm actually just fine. I need to not, let's see what I could go get involved with. And the flip side is one time I was doing this exact thing and I said, this job is dead. I'm in a dead end spot. There's no advancement. There's nothing else I want to do. I'm discovering I don't like the way the culture's turning. I need to find something else. And great. So what do I want? And some of the answers are in what I just said. I'm like, I need a culture I align with. I want to have a better relationship with a supervisor. My current boss is kind of absentee. So it's not bad, but they're not really helping me grow. I want one that will. You at least check on that. Things like that. I'm like, yep, I got to find a new job. And I have only had a few major job shifts in my career, I guess. I've spent, once I was with Bell South for 7 years, I went to autotrader.com and related Cox companies for 7 more. And then I've stayed with companies since then for generally about 3 years apiece since, just by chance. It's just worked out that way. It's not like I aggressively said at 3-year mark, I think I need to go. Something just changed and the right job appeared in front of me afterwards. So I couldn't argue, and things change under me. Like my company, it was a small boutique company. It was acquired by Cognizant. That's where I work. I'm not speaking for them. I'm not here on behalf of them. I'm just speaking for myself. Got to say that anytime my employer comes up, I'm not representing them. I'm
makes
on my
sense.
own behalf.
Okay.
So that's how I see it. It's like, why do you want to change? I'm not saying don't. I'm saying figure out why so you make sure you get it.
Got you. Thank you for sharing. That was pretty good. So now this was because I'm in a job and I want to maybe look for another position or another challenge, right? What can you tell us about when is the time to say I'm done working for someone else? And I'm asking you this because I'm a director in the company where I work, which also I'm representing myself over here, not talking for anyone, but I'm a director. I do good money. I have a good life, but then I see that I have 3, 4, or maybe 5 friends that are doing double or triple what I'm doing because they got fired at some point and they put their business and now they have the money, right? And I'm like, well, I have been in this corporate world for 10, 15 years and now they are making more. When should I do that, right? So what would be your advice on that?
I'm wondering if I'm the right person to ask because I've been the guy who everybody says, aren't you an independent? Like, no, I work here. What's going on with that? I've actually had that at 1 or 2 jobs where the people are asking like, are you like, why are you asking how you can help with some consultant look work? I'm like, no, I work here, but when I have spare capacity, my boss encourages me to go ahead and see what else I can help with. Makes it a flexible thing for me and keeps it interesting. So let's touch on that topic for you. And if money is the thing, you might be right. You might have to go out on your own 2 or 3 times salary factor. You may not be able to fix that at the office, right? It's just not like, on the other hand, if you, and I do propose you do that kind of analysis like I was describing. If you do that and you discover, actually, I'm really comfortable with things here, and I do need a raise, that seems fair, then you can talk with somebody there about how to arrange that maybe, or how to make the case for it. Any number of things. What additional value would I need to have? What responsibility would I need to take on? What goals would I need to accomplish? Something you could at least have a conversation. I'll tell you, I did this with myself at one point because I was talking to a buddy of mine, and here's the flip side of it, which is one reason I tend to stay employed with companies, though I'm discovering I like being a consultant, and I would probably stay with consulting companies for a little, assuming I were to change in the first, is I like not having to wonder about where my next work is coming from. And everyone I know who's a consultant says they spend at least a third of their time developing new work, growing opportunities, and people who are interested in having their services. I have zero interest in doing it. So if I recontext my work as part of the value proposition of where I work is I get to do interesting and varied consulting engagement. And I don't have to find them because my employer is busy doing that and has a whole team of people they need to keep, who need to busily keep me busy, right? They get paid by keeping me busy. That is a portion of value that I don't have to go create for myself. I don't have to find my own health insurance because I live in the United States. So that's a thing, right? I don't have to do all of the other infrastructure that comes with being a independent consultant. I don't have to wonder about where the invoices are, who's paid me and who hasn't. I don't have to negotiate that, all of those things. So there is a value for me in not being independent. I just think it's important to acknowledge that that is part of the package of compensation I get. I don't have to wonder where my next job. Now, so that's kind of it. Now, that said, I do think of it every now and then when I'm evaluating. There are a lot of places I could work. So given the fact that other places will not make me hunt my work either, is this the place I should continue to work? And those are the conversations I have with. I think shifting gears for a quick second about this topic, I would tell people if you're looking at going independent, and I'm not talking you down from it. I'm not saying don't go, saying just be real about what it is. You may find it's no big deal, like all of the work I was describing, invoicing, planning your cash flow, getting new work in a pipeline, doing all of those things. You may come to love that. If you want the independence that goes with those things, and if you want to have a chat with the boss, you go to any mirror in your house and start talking to them, right? Be independent, do the work that goes with it, or find ways to outsource it. There are folks that'll handle your accounting and invoices and payables and all the other stuff, and find somebody to help you with marketing. You can do those things, but make a plan, see if it's worth it, compare it to what you got. The answer could be yes, no, or not yet, but then you know what it would take,
Got it. Good advice. Thank you, Ryland. Okay. So jumping back to your books, now the next one. So then a few months ago, May 2023, there's the Rock Crusher, right? Tell us about the idea of this book. Yeah, it's a
Well,
nice,
first, I
nice,
got to
nice
find the
book.
right spot in the frame. But the thing I want to point out is I'm the third author on this. It was Steve Adolph's. Steve Adolph's was the primary author, let's just say, and Shane Hasty. And then they had drafted a few chapters, which I read, and our conversation went really well from there in the sense of, I felt like I kind of talked to them about, hey, I feel like I could maybe make a contribution to this. And they said, oh, we've been trying to figure out how to ask you. So that's good. I think it would be a good collaboration. I said, yeah. So that's a thing. So the thesis there is, as it says in the title, a model for flow-based backlog management. And Steve liked the idea of a rock crusher being, a tool, right, that you throw raw, unrefined rock, and through its various processes, it, refines the product, removing waste and leaving value. And then you draw the value out through a thin pipe, because with rock, throw in 100 units of something and you get out a half a unit of useful stuff at the bottom, perhaps, whatever your proportion. And that there's a waste gate. So all the rest of that goes out. And that this happens in a constant flow. You keep putting things in the top and you keep drawing out a thin pipe of value at the bottom, which is your refined, valuable product. If we take that metaphor and we apply it over to backlog management, we get some benefits by thinking about it this way. One, you should be throwing stuff out of your backlog, right? You come into a lot of ideas, and Hector, you must run into this yourself in your job. There's way more work you could do, or want to do, I should say, way more work you want to do than you can. The capacity of your dev team is more or less a fixed, just say, given hiring, firing skills, etc. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So how do you decide which of all of these brilliant ideas are the things your business should really go do? The book helps frame this in a way that says that's an aggressive, active process. It isn't something that just happens. And most Agile frameworks talk about that. They kind of hide that. It's not intentional. But if we talk about Scrum for a second, right? Scrum really talks about the single Agile team. And then you kind of go up from there in scaling to Scrum of Scrums, and maybe Scrum of Scrums, and then maybe you get starting into safe. After a certain threshold, you might as well just pull safe off the shelf, right? Does that work for you somewhat?
Yeah.
So it just talks about the team, and it pretty much aggressively, the way I read things is, well, the product owner encapsulates the entire business behind. If there's priority conflicts, stakeholders who have to be wrangled into the thing, analysis work that has to be done about what the product should do, et cetera, all that happens upstream with the product team, and the product owner is the point of contact at which the team sees it. And it's kind of quiet on it from, I'm not saying we don't talk about roadmaps and other stuff, but all of that other work is kind of silent. It's just encapsulated in a convenient API-like way behind the product owner interface, let's say. There is a ton of work about that, especially as you get into scaling, right? There's, the analysis work that's required to figure out upfront the decomposition of what teams have what dependencies, and then how many interdependencies they have for all the various products they have, and the spider web of activity, big room planning kind of work with SAFe, is all necessary in one way or another. We should make that work visible. It's not one, it has a cost. It has a real cost. If you put SAFe big room planning on everything you were to consider doing, you would be wasting a huge amount of effort and money and work and capacity of your organization. So how do we make that better? Or at least how do we make it visible so that you can apply agile continuous improvement processes to the product funnel of your backlog? Making sense so far?
Mm-hmm.
So in the book, we go through a lot of roles. We go through how you can manage different backlogs in different way, depending on your personal needs or your organizational needs of size and scale and so on. And just kind of how to make all of that visible. One of the things I loved the most about this was, and it took a while for Steve and I to wrangle on this. We had to fight each other constructively. It's one reason I like working with the guys. It was the concept of the rock. We put a rock as a thing. We said, how some agile frameworks just call everything a product backlog item, and some are fit for use for development and others are not, right? Epics features, not fit for development, too big, right? Can't get it done in a sprint, can't size them, can't make an invest story out of it, that kind of thing. Similar thing about the rock. It could be, hey, I think this idea is a great product we should continue developing. And I'll know it if we can get a customer focus group together to give us 80% positive response. That's a pretty decent rock, and the team might never see it, right? It's way upstream in the product funnel, but it'll start to help rule out things we should and shouldn't advance deeper into the funnel for refinement. Because as you go further down that funnel, the cost increases. You've sunk more cost, and the refinement work is more painstaking because you're getting closer and closer to something a team could actually build. And as you do that, it becomes more expensive in terms of time and the people you have to involve and the level of design and the opportunity costs. Because I'm spending my analysis effort on this, I'm not spending it on that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's all kinds of costs that increase. We wanted to have a way for people to see that and show it. Now I'm going to come back to rocks for a second. I fell in love with this concept after we wrangled on it a little. A rock is defined as the following. It's an intent with a verifiable model that would get produced as part of the work of the rock, and a test that you would apply to the verifiable model to see if it could be done, to see if it passes or not. Now let me put that in user story terms. Intent, the narrative of the story and what you're going to build from. The verifiable model will be the produced code, the working software, right? That's the verifiable model. What do you do to verify it? Check it against the ACs, acceptance criteria. Does it pass my acceptance criteria? Make sense? But that other thing I was saying about the focus group is also an acceptable rock. It's just a different level of validation, right? If I think a particular user story would be good, I could do a light test on it first by writing my user story on paper. Before a developer even sees it, I've got my narrative and my, however you want to do your user stories, but narrative and at least your ACs, right? And walk it around to a few end users who might be friendly every way and say, thinking about building this for you, and it would look like this when it's done. What do you think? And if I didn't have at least 5 out of 6 say yes, then it fails the test. That's a level 1 test. Do we agree? Is there some level of belief that is a valid based belief that this would be? And I could maybe change that 5 out of 6 with experience. Maybe I change it to 8 out of 10 or 4 out of 6. Something like that. I could change it based on my learning, but it passes what I was describing as a rock, right? I could also do that with a feature, a big collection of stuff. I liked that either of these presents a way of saying, all right, we're thinking about doing this. How could we check we're in the right direction without having to build code? Not that I won't build code if it's the right thing to do, but how often, as you said, you're a director in an organization. I assume of development stuff is my assumption. I forget that we haven't talked about this a lot yet. How often have you seen a team build a thing that if they had done a mock-up and showed it to some users first, they'd have discovered this wasn't even valid? I'm not saying it happens a lot, but it happens, right? I was teaching a lecture. I was guest lecturing at a university one time to a PM class about agility. I was just brought in by somebody. I said, let's pretend we're building a library search application. And I started listing the fields you might want to look for books on. And I had like author, God, I gotta be in frame, don't I? Author and title and year published and some other things, right? And at the bottom, I put ISBN, unique identifier for books. And some students raised their hand. And I said, okay, what's up? They said, ISBN needs to be at the top. It's the first thing we're interested in. Now, I went to college in 1987, so it wasn't for me. And I said, why? I would never think that's useful, right? Product, I've discovered something new about my users, right? They said, there are so many multiple editions of books out, and the chapters are all different when they do that. The topic might be the same, the author might be the same, but the chapter order is totally different, or it has different dialects, or some professors always give us the ISBN so that we get the right book. We can even order our books by ISBN bookstore. Like, I would never have known that if I hadn't talked to you first, and I might not have built the thing you need. So I always give people that as a simple example of, you got it. There are times building it first will help people because they don't know it till they see it. So you build some cheap prototype or working software that they could walk. Other times you could do just fine by talking to your users, So the Rock Crusher tries to surface that, and I love the way it gives a good language to do it. It broadens the thinking and tries to make all the various costs at least considered. If you're in a small group and you've only got like 20 people in your whole company, you don't need a big pipeline to figure this out. If you have 20,000 people in your company, you probably want a little more robust process.
Okay, so it sounds very interesting, because what I got, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that this book will help maybe business analysts, of course, but product owners, product managers, understanding what needs to go through this pipe, right? What makes sense to build, what doesn't, how to validate with the teams, right? If it makes sense, if it works with the users, right? So basically, it will help me do better discovery for the products that I want to build, right? But you also mentioned that it will also help me, or it will also show me how to work with dependencies with other teams, right? Like, it also tries to help me with the challenges that normally scaling Scrum will help me with, right? So do you mention some kind of, do you propose some kind of framework over there, or is it just the discovery part, or also has to do with the delivery?
It's definitely both through discovery into delivery. It's all the way through. It takes a holistic view. We're just saying there's different people involved at different times, right? If let's pretend I'm the product professional, whether it's whatever level I'm at, and you're the technical lead, I might bounce ideas off of you to begin with to make sure I'm even considering something that's feasible and get your ideas. And we're talking about the top of the funnel. As I move lower down, it's being refined. The ask I have, right? My why and my what versus the how, which you're primarily responsible for, but we're collaborating, right? You're going to have input. We should collaborate. There's no question. But the degree we collaborate at might change as we travel down the funnel towards the thin pipe of drawings. We should work out between the two of us when we're figuring out our backlog process. At what point do I need to make sure, what's our 50-50? At which point I'm not just being advised by you with a little thing. We're moving through into, like, if you really want to build this, here's our commit. Here's what we're going to need to start to do. Dependency analysis, things like that. At what point do we need to start to figure those things out so that I'm not ahead of you? Also, I'm not making promises to anywhere else in the organization without having consulted you, right? We might do that in different ways on different things. And of course, we'll get better at it the more we do, because we're collaborating. Right? I don't want to bring you in on everything you don't need to, and you don't want me bothering you, is my experience in this. It's not that you're not willing to. We just want to do it the right way. I haven't met anybody who's not willing to be helpful. They just don't want to be involved when they don't need to be involved, as it were. So this lets us look at our funnel of work and start to get level sets between us about where are our touch points. How much can we act independently of each other? And at what point should we not do that? Is one of the things I see when I look at the book. It talks about all those roles, right? Technical, subject matter expert, and so on. And it would be different in every different company. Let's pretend for a minute, if we're a company and we're a large scale company, and for every 50 ideas that we come up with that require coordinated action, we do 10. We might test a lot of those ideas earlier to check which ones are feasible, and are we overbooking any part of the organization with capacity issues, and t-shirt sizing and expert opinions go into it. If it's just a company of 20 people and we're sort of working distributedly and we're still at the small to startup level, we're going to move a lot faster, and the ideas I'm bringing are probably going to be smaller at a time because we're limited by the fact that we're only 20 people. Not all of them are developers, probably, right? But at a really big company, we could bring more along if we needed scale. We have ability to shift resources around if we feel we should, right? That's a scaling question. So it varies, is the thing. We're just trying to help you set up these things, ask the right questions, and we give examples, we propose ideas, There's, forget if it's in the book or only on Steve's website, we put out there, we call the Rock Crusher Canvas, which presents questions, concepts, ideas, and helps you sketch out, if I want to do this, what benefits am I trying to achieve? Why do I feel a need for this? What's missing in my current approach? How will I know that's solved? What are we doing there? We're starting to get you towards a level 1 rock. If I were to implement a rock crusher concept, why am I doing it? What benefit do I believe I will get? How will I know I'm getting it? How will I test that? Or at least asking you to think about it, right? Because if it doesn't pass your opinion of, yeah, this would be better than what I'm doing now, you shouldn't do it, right? It'd just be wait. Or you should ask, okay, what do I need to change so that it could be better? Because I still have the problem I have. You came to it because you wanted to improve something. So I found it really good for that. And like other things, the Scrum Guide, the IIBA's BA BOK, the PM, PMI's PM BOK, other things like that. By doing it this way, we've created, I don't want to be grandiose, but let's say we've created a language or we've proposed a language where we can talk about these things, right? When we talk about backlog and we talk about sprint and other things, we've declared terms that now we can use and talk about. When I say, hey, last spring's retro didn't go really well, here's what's going on. We now know what I'm talking about. That didn't happen before those words were known, right? Sprint didn't mean that and retro didn't mean that, right? It meant things maybe about racing and rockets. Now we know they are part of software development in another context. So we do that with this too. Hey, what would a rock look like on? Okay, how would we get that test? When should we talk about moving it down a level into something we're committing into work and we pose, do technical analysis? How do we make those decisions? Definition of ready for technical analysis is a question. Things like that. I'll stop there, but I feel like that's how we would know how to use it.
No, sounds really good. Thanks for sharing. Many companies where I have been in transformations, going from waterfall to agile, implementing Scrum or Kanban or whatever, I see that there's a big gap in the intake process, right? So I think that I will take a look at this book and I will try to, I'm sure that it will help me be a better coach for those challenges, right?
Oh, yeah, I think it can always help. It always helps to have new ideas. And if you do pick it up, it'd be great to come back and talk with you more actively for you about, here's what I learned and here's how it made a difference. I'd be happy to come back.
Now we have a part two. Now we have a part two, right? For this video.
Yes.
That's good.
Let's do that sometime.
Right. Ryland, one of maybe you can help me with this challenge. I have a almost 7-year-old son, and this guy always asks me, hey, Dad, what do you do at work? And I said, I'm an agile coach. And he's like, well, that's great, but what the hell do you do every day, right? So how do you explain to this kid what an agile coach does for a team or for a company, right? In your words.
That's an interesting thing. You reminded me with your shift of frame. I better get people able to see that sign or you'll get a lot of questions later. What does that say? Yeah, I have had that problem too. It's really funny. Even after I wrote a book or two about it, I had somebody in my family who still said, still don't get it. That was kind of funny to me, but I'm like, okay, I get it. It's all right. I think if I had to explain it to your son, and how old is he again, did you say?
Almost 7.
You know how some people like to play soccer or football, depending on how you call it. Like, yeah, I help them do that, but I help them do it at work. Not soccer, but something like I help them learn, because I think of it as a performance skill, and do it better. Because you can always get a certain amount of good on your own, but there's usually a point for most people where they need a little help with coaching and to do something better than they're used to doing it on their own. It's just hard to see our own challenges and problems. It's hard to untie the knot from the inside sometimes. So that's what I do. I go to work, I help people figure out how they're going to do running around this particular track a lot better.
Sounds pretty straightforward, right? So that's something that I will apply. Thank you for sharing. Very simple, very straightforward. Awesome definition. Okay. Ryland, the Agile Manifesto has been over here for almost 2 decades ago, or something more, I believe, 2 decades or something. So how relevant do you think it is in today's tech landscape, right? Still working?
I love it. I'll be honest. I keep, every now and then I pick up an article on post-Agile or Agile 2.0 or, Agile's dead or something like that. And I just read the first couple of paragraphs. I'm like, okay, were you just clickbait or not? Because I haven't read any yet that have been really deeply exciting to me. Like, okay, you said something special. That whatever article it. And here's kind of why. I think these are things we're going to see for a long time. The whole, we value individuals and interactions over processes, right? Because if the processes and tools were all we needed, this would have been fixed 20 or 30 years ago. We had lots of processes and tools. We still do. I'm because of this, I couldn't go to Agile 2023 this year. Very upset about that. I find that conference inspiring. I went last year and just loved it. And there are any number of tool vendors who will match a process to it. And if every one of those had a good one, or even a half of them, or 10th of them had it, this would all be old hat. We'd all be using it, right? And that pendulum swings around. Somebody says, "Oh, we need more tools. Oh, we've got to go back towards speed." People use the tool. People don't know what to do with the tool. They're not going to be successful, right? A cheap tool in the hands of a master craftsman is better than an expensive tool in the hand, because the master knows what to do with it. It goes back to mindset and experience. So I think all of the Agile values are going to stick around. They make sense on their face. And until somebody says, that doesn't matter anymore, it's not alienation, then I don't think we're going to stop seeing them. They're not going to suddenly become invalid. I'm not sure one other thing, but I'm pulling up the Agile Manifesto because I'm always afraid I'm going to quote something wrong on it for a second, because it's important to get for a second. So I'm that guy, right? So individuals and interactions over process tools, working software, collaboration, responding to change. One of the most powerful things I was ever taught in my Agile growth learning experience, and it was from the folks at that first place where they said, "Hey, let's figure this out together." I want to pass this on to those of you who may not have heard this. I think it's a great way of saying, are we on the right path? Or what's the smallest amount of something we could do? The way we like to ask. What are just enough processes and tools to support individuals and interact? What is just enough documentation to enable us to create working software? I ask that as a BA all the time, right? I don't want to make a document just for the sake of it. There's no point in that to me. It's waste for me. It's waste for you as a developer. What's just enough for us to make good working software? What is just enough contract negotiation for us to collaborate together with us and the customer, right? What's enough of a framework for us to begin collaborating? You could think of that as the MVP concept, right? What is just enough contract for us to begin working together? We can always stop. We can always stop working together if we discover it's the wrong. What's just enough planning to enable us to respond to change quickly and successfully? Like, I don't want to spend all day planning, but I might want to identify the contingencies I need to pivot to if an assumption of this software doesn't work out, right? Like, we're buying an off-the-shelf tool to plug into our thing. If that doesn't work, what's it going to mean? Probably 2 to 3 sprints of additional work if this doesn't. Great, let's find that out soon. That's our contingency. Let's try that first to see if we got to expand our scope or what. So it's planning, right? I'm doing some planning about my big contingencies so I can respond to change, right? Makes sense? So I don't know where to attribute that to. It was something one of the folks I learned from early was saying, and it's always stuck with me. And that's why I see this manifesto sticking around. Maybe that's the values, right? Those are our Agile values. Various specific other principles and, the 12 principles and stuff that might change. I think our 4 core values are not going to, that's how I see it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I just love that just enough from the right to get the thing in the left. So it actually makes a lot of sense rather than the we value more, because we value more, it actually means that, right? How can we do less of these to get to more of these, right? But phrasing it that way makes a lot of sense. I will use it if you don't care all the time now. Thank you.
I certainly don't. It won't go away that way. And knowledge is, if you can't figure it from having written 3 books, I like sharing knowledge. Yeah. It's like, we're not doing the processes and tools for themselves. We're doing them to set the stage for individuals and interact. We would, if we could do 0 process and tool to have great individuals and interactions, that's fine. And I think that's seen in a lot of our work, right? If you're just 4 people working in a room, you can use a Post-it, you can use a literal wall with, index cards and move them around. There's only the 4 of you, it's fine. 400 of you, you probably need a little bit of tool to let you focus on the individuals and interactions. We're going to use this much tool to get this other benefit, right? Just that kind of thing. I think that applies all the way down. So no, I love it. I'm glad it was some new thing I could share with you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Okay. So in your opinion, these, let me give a little context. So I have joined some companies where I got in there and they are moving, like you mentioned, shifting from waterfall to agile. And then the project managers, now we call them Scrum Masters, and they take a training in the best of the cases, and that's it. Let's go. We're agile right now. Yeah. So we did Scrum, and now we're agile. That's right. How it kind of works, or everyone looks at it, right? So, or worse, we implemented something like SAFe by the book, and we're agile, right? So
now we are.
So so then we are, right? So how do you see, what are the challenges that you have faced while transitioning, or what are not the challenges, but maybe let's ask this. So there are hidden things or practices that sometimes they smell and you're like, there's something wrong over here. We're doing Scrum, we're doing Safe, whatever, but this doesn't look agile, right? So if there are Scrum teams looking at this video and saying, we do Scrum, we do Kanban, we do Safe, we're good, what would be some indicators that you're not being agile, even though you have the framework over there?
Okay, so we'll keep it to a couple of teams at the most. We're not going to talk about Safe, okay?
Yeah.
Although we will. I think we should. We're going to borrow a thing or two.
Yeah.
So one of the things I first look for is the level of backlog stability. I have met a few people who say, I'm doing great Agile. We write good user stories. We've got 6 months of user stories in the backlog and we go straight through them. Like, does your backlog change? Do you write those 6 months of stories and you just keep adding to the outer 6 month, outer 6 month, as you eat a month, you add a new 6 month and it goes straight through? Yeah. I'm like, so where's the agility? What change are you responding to? We don't do that. I'm like, okay, well, then it's great that are you building working software? Is the second smell. Are you building working software every 2 week, 2 week cycle or something? And by the way, I'm going to use 2 as a standard. I happen to like it, but it's not required. 1's fine, 3's okay. You get to 4, I start to get questions. Like, really? You do 12 sprints a year? That sounds pretty not good. I don't like that. I have a lot of reasons to not like that. So let's pretend it's 2. Like, okay, oh, well, no. You see, we do a design. We have 3 different things running at any one time. We have a design sprint, and then at the end of that, the design work goes into the backlog for development, and then it's developed, and then the next sprint they do it. That's not good. That's not good. You've got, how do you measure your velocity? My what? And I know velocity is a debatable concept. A lot of people don't like it. They want to do no estimates and so forth. I am not against that. I will say the following: in the consulting space and most product professionals that I have met or leaders of development organizations, they want some estimate of how much work they can get through in some unit, and doing no estimates is not conducive. I have not yet seen that successful. I'm not saying it's the wrong thing to do for a small group, but I'm saying at a larger scale, you kind of need to justify your spend. Whether if you're hiring consultants, you want to know what you're getting, even if it's only a certain amount of capacity. If you're doing it in-house, somebody's responsible for how much product they get built this year at a senior level. Estimation winds up being a thing. So I talk about estimate. That's my typical experience. And we can talk more about that for other reasons. So that's the second thing, is they separate the getting it QA'd and whatever your definition of done is, which I insist includes it is working at least completely in development, and it has been tested by somebody who was not the developer. Pair programming and certain other things could be accepted, and that it passed QA. It could be deployed with good confidence. Not it still has to go. It is potentially shippable, right? Meets that definition, whatever ours is. And I'm still a fan of CI/CD if I can get it. A lot of people can't. So that said, those are some of the smells I look for when they're shifting. Does your backlog change? Are you completing work inside a sprint? As a way, I would at least not laugh at a definition of done. It would make sense. I don't think my teachers or myself would laugh at it if I heard. As we kind of alluded to before, who's got backlog authority? Where does the direction come from? Is the team able to respond to change? If I look at the values, right? How much working software are you making? In the sense of, is it flowing well? Not like I care specifically that you're getting a ton done. I want to be getting the right. Does your executive have to be involved in every sprint? That at any company of any size, that's bad. That's the authority needs to be lower. So, and without that, I have heard from other coaches many times where, okay, senior leadership becomes the bottleneck because they want to approve every story or every collection of work for a sprint. You can't delegate that and know that you have people who keep to the strategic vision appropriately. You might have a problem. So that level of control, are there appropriate balances back and forth about control is a thing. Work getting completed inside a sprint. I said that about QA, but in this case, I mean like carryover. How much carryover? If you're getting, I like the measure of story points or points, however you want to use them. We could have a big debate about that. Let's not do that. If you're just talking about points in general, like, okay, your number of points that completed in the sprint, no matter when they were started, the number that completed in the sprint is a good, but that can include things you carried from last sprint into here that finished. And it wouldn't include things you started, but didn't complete, right? Those would go to the next sprint. If all of your work is finishing from the last sprint, right? If you're carrying over everything and that's like 90% of your number is stuff you started last sprint, something's wrong. Let's fix that. I want a very reliable number of what you can get or the team can't persist for. Not against starting something early if you've got capacity. If we do that all the time beyond a small percentage of the overall work, something might be wrong. Are you gun shy of how much work you're committing to? Similarly, if it's never committing in the sprint, why are you overcommitting every sprint? We want this. Nobody's asking to overcommit. Let's get it right. Start with a number you can do and work up until you're not finishing. We'll back it off. We don't have to get it right. I guess while it's not exactly a smell, there are a lot of things I look for about what kind of support is this group operating with, what level of trust, transparency, not scaled, but safe, as in comfortable and collaborative, accountability and understanding. Does the group get it, right? Like, is the team allowed to make mistakes? And if so, how is that handled? So I look for cultural aspects that tell me that there's a problem. Like, I don't want the agile transformation to be a flash in the pan. I don't want it to have to back out. And culture is the number one reason that happened. And I'll borrow that from SAFe. I've only taken a couple of classes on SAFe. I use the concepts a lot. I like it. I have a variety of feelings about it, but I'm not like a giant evangelist for it, but I think it's got a lot of merit in a lot of places, at least a lot of the concepts. I'm not a fan of textbook anything that goes from Scrum to Kanban to SAFe. I think you need to adapt to what circumstances are. I'm not a purist. One of the concepts I know they taught in the class, and I loved it, was, I think it was Deming, who was saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast. If your culture is antithetical to the strategy you're trying to put through, if you have a very change-averse, risk-averse culture, you're going to have a hard time with Agile unless you can get that change.
Yeah, I agree. You have mentioned, or we have talked about SAFe, right? So what parts of SAFe do you consider of value and you consider that promotes the Agile principles? And what parts smell for you?
So you're giving me an opportunity to say a thing I didn't mention to you I wanted to throw in, and that's great. I kept hearing about SAFe when I was first learning, and finally I got to take a class on. And SAFe is a topic there are no small opinions. Do you find that? Everyone's got it sucks or it rocks kind of opinion, right? I figured out why. Have you ever seen this diagram? It's usually talked about. It's a little cartoon. There are a lot of variations of it. Two people are looking at a figure on the ground. They're looking at it, one's from the left or right, and it's a number. And one of them looks at it from where they're standing and says, "That's a 6." And the other looks at it and says, "It's a 9." Right? You must have seen that. Right? It's all about an example of, hey, remember there are other perspectives. Not everyone, check your assumptions. There's all kinds of, I love it. SAFe is that in the middle, okay? And pretend it's a basketball in the middle between. If you come from a startup culture that is, heavily small scale no scale. It's like 8 people in it or something like that. Let's say up to 30 or 40. You look at SAFe with all of its framework and process and stuff it does, and you look at it and say, look, I have to commit all of this stuff to other teams. I can't respond quickly without going through like 5 people for approvals if it's going to be an issue. Where's the agility in all that? You just waterfalled my agile. It's just, that's if you come from a strongly agile view. Now, if you're on the other side, hopefully I can do this. If you're on the other side of the, and you're looking at this waterfall, this basketball, and you come from a strictly big scale waterfall background, right? Where you do all of your requirements work and then all of your analysis and design work and all of your dev and all, you do one after the other with no change, right? Or you have to process a change request if you're going to make one, right? That's your background. You, from this, once I launch it, I can't change anything for 2 years. And you look at SAFe and you say, we're going to do maybe 4 program increments a year, 3 months each. We can change things along the way that we need to. I have a look at all the flexibility. I don't have to do a CR. I can say to somebody, you want to make that change? Let's go to the next PI. Is it more urgent than the next PI? If it is, we have some things we can do. But if not, let's fit it in the next program increment because we're not doing any, that's when we'll set down to do our real plan. So that's how I see SAFe. If you come from waterfall, you see SAFe as having a ton of agility in it for you, and you're probably right. If you come from a perspective where you had all of this freewheelingness and everyone you needed to see was within easy collaboration range of you, you feel you're giving a lot up to structure. So that's why I say both of these are, from my point of view, as an analyst who deals with what problem are we solving? Will this proposed action solve that? What is our belief about whether it will or not? Agile, SAFe, and waterfall are all approaches to solving problems. Somebody said to me, do you want Agile in every case? I'm like, I think it offers a lot for almost every circumstance. However, if you never need to change anything and you are very assembly line, don't need the things that are described in the Agile Manifesto, maybe it isn't for you. You'd be investing a lot in change. You'd be adding some process that you may not benefit from. I mean, if you never need to respond to change, why have a framework that's set up to do that? I said, you might like the fact that it produces working code on a predictable schedule, but you could just change your process to do things like that, fully Agile. So I said, what's the issue? Now, personally, I'd rather just go with agility. I think it works straight off the shelf, but that's how I see that. So that's kind of my take on SAFe. When I hear people talk about it, it's like, I could go on a little bit, but I think that's kind of the thesis there. Like, it depends on where you're coming from, what problem you're solving. And I will say, I do like that SAFe makes you think about things at this level. It's a little more about organizational change than just straight some of the stuff I see at, small scales, single team stuff. Because you deal with leadership and you deal with how will I change the whole organization. You don't need to use SAFe unless you need to change a lot of this, go through an organizational change, right? If you need one team of 10 people, you don't need to implement SAFe. That's a lot. That's buying a giant truck when you need a smart car. You don't, that level of stuff. That's way too much process and tools. I think maybe that's a good thing to end on this point with. I'll say this much, right? If you look at any Agile framework as a process and tool, line 1 of our manifesto, right? But we are saying individuals and interactions are more important. To enable individuals and interactions for a development organization of 1,000 people who have to interact for whatever reason, I need them to interact for all the reasons one might have that at a big company, then I might need a process and tool like SAFe. If it's 20 people, I doubt I need as much process and tool as SAFe. What is just enough to get the job done? Straight Scrum might not do it for 1,000 people. I need a scale. Now I'll stop there on that.
Yeah.
We can talk more. It's a huge topic space, right? But
yeah, no, I totally get what you mean. I mean, if you're coming from certain activities more waterfall and less agile, you jump into SAFe. It's like oxygen, right? Oh, I'm able to plan. I'm able to, get the focus of the team in the PI planning. So it sounds good. But if you're coming from doing maybe a Spotify model, or maybe having Kanban with Scrum of Scrums meeting only where the teams are very mature, and you jump to SAFe, then you will be like, oh, my wings are cut, right? So yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So it all depends.
Yeah, it depends. Like, what problem are you trying to solve? Scaling 20 people, Scrum is Scrum. No big deal, right?
Yeah.
Let's just put heads together and talk. Make sure we're aggressively collaborating when we need to. Make sure we know when we need. 2,000 people, maybe it can't be Scrum is Scrum. Maybe. I'm not, nobody needs to write me about either of those things, okay? If you've done a successful Scrum of Scrums with 2,000 people, I'm not fighting you. I'm not telling you did something wrong. I'm just saying it's like off the cuff. It would surprise me. So that's all I need.
Yeah, please give us the recipe, because you are an awesome coach, I guess, or something. You did magic over there, right? So yeah. So yeah, I totally agree. This with what you mentioned about SAFe. Totally agree. And I wish I could hate SAFe. I have taken all the certifications possible because I wanted to push myself to being able to just say yes, I like it, or it doesn't work, and it's not that easy. It's a gray area. It's not black or white, right? Like you mentioned, I'm actually RTE right now, release training engineer for one of the customers where I'm working for, so I could not say anything bad about SAFe right now, because I'm doing it over there.
Yeah, I guess let me throw a thing out just to check. If you have to manage a lot of dependencies that are not consistent, like you work with 5 or 10 other teams. Sometimes you have dependencies over there or over here or over there, and you have to manage that. SAFe's not a bad way to go for that. It's intended to manage that process, but it's not a light process.
Yeah, totally. Probably the biggest concern I have about SAFe is how much is that they are not able to simplify. For me, Agile has to do with simplification, and the fact that you have to learn like 300 pages or whatever. It kind of drives me crazy. But once you understand it, I think they could simplify it in the coming versions, I guess.
Yeah. Can I give you a short example on a thing with that? Because I said I'm not
sure.
So a group I worked with, they did have dependencies and scaling. They needed to work with that a bit, and they wanted to remain agile. And they said they wanted to implement SAFe, and we went with that track. They weren't doing it formally. And remember, I'm not a purist, so I didn't require anything that way anyway. And where we got to was one of the folks, we'd reached the limit of what they felt they could do. They'd matured a certain amount. And they got to the point of saying, aren't we supposed to be doing like PI planning? And I was so happy. Inside, I was like smiling and cheerful. And I said, yeah, do you think we should start on that? I said, yeah, I feel like we've gotten as much as we can from talking just to a few other people. We really need to get everybody together and make sure we're aligned. I said, okay, we were working distributed. I said, so we're not going to get in a room and do a big draw red lines, prescriptive, out of the box PI planning the way SAFe says you're going to do it, like with the recipe for a 2-day session. Like, we're not going to be there. We don't have the necessary inputs. We don't have the experience. I said, could it get there someday? Sure. I said, I'd rather look at it as, let's book 2 or 3 hours over the course of a week each day. We'll be done before the end of the week. We're not going to need all of it, but I just want it in case people want to. Let's make sure. And then we prepped the product management team to have 1-page write-ups and prioritization, and to have made sure they aligned with leadership about what the organizational priorities were, what had to get done at the executive, from the executive level, because I said, we're going to plan capacity. Everybody was on board. Product teams were on board with it. The tech team was on board. It was a good example with the group. So we borrowed the safe point of, we need to come out of this meeting, right? How much is just enough process and tool? What is just enough comprehensive documentation of our intention? What is just enough negotiation when we walk out of that room to enable us to be collaborating on the stuff we said we're going to do? What is just enough planning that we're not wasting a ton of effort, but we've still identified these could move and these are flexible. Excuse me, these can't move and these are flexible, right? We've come out of that about our features and epics, however we're planning, or key points about stuff. So as long as we come out of our planning work with what's still flexible and what isn't, where our dependencies are, like knowing what we got to build, the right people were in the room to establish the dependency, and so on, and learn from some past lessons. So we don't have to do it the way SAFe does it, but we'll get the value that SAFe promises by doing this. And we did it, and we struggled through, and it was a good bit of work. It was a lot of work for everyone. It was the first time anybody had done it. I don't think PI planning is ever small, really. It's never zero work. If you've got to do PI planning, you're doing it because you need what comes out of it, right? It's the smallest process and tool you can use to get that number of people. And we had like 6 different product managers who were competing in a sense for the resources of the various teams at hand, right? They all had their goals, and we frequently used the executive priorities that have been laid out at the beginning of the year. And if your stuff aligned, okay, it made it on the list earlier, and we kept seeing what we had left over to take on other stuff. And we negotiated, could we take out that part? What of that feature could we do without dependencies on other, right? Is there still something useful we could do here? And that's why we broke it up with time, like that person and their BA/product owner would go off and talk about it, because they could understand what the dependency was, and say, okay, without that, we could still do these things, and we would still like that done. That would be valuable. And if there wasn't anything, great, it comes off the table,
Yeah.
So we could refine it and say, all right, this is our thing. And we found key dependencies. One of the key things that tripped this particular group up was dependencies external and vendor, like other third-party software that would need to adapt something to get it done, and to achieve the goal overall was wanted. Like they had to do enabler work in SAFe terms, right? Runway work. They had to do enabler and runway work for this group to be able to build the feature, but they were an external partner, and they didn't usually commit to a schedule. So we said, all right, let's remember they've never met a deadline we've asked for yet. That's a high risk item. If you need that in this PI, they need to commit and deliver within the first 4 weeks of the 12-week period, or it's out. And we're just going to move on to a backup item. Enough planning to respond to change. We want to do that, but if the dependency doesn't come in by week 4, we're dropping. They'll probably deliver it by 12, in which case it'll be clean for the next PI, right? It was still just great. We achieved the goals that PI wants that you want to come out of with PI. And they've managed to iterate on it and get better at it, is what I've followed up with the person who runs it. And
that's a nice
I think
story.
that's a great use. Let's use the SAFe concepts. We don't have to do it exactly the way SAFe said.
Yeah, and I think you start understanding this as you advance in your career. At the beginning, you just want to put everything like the book says, right? And this is just the way that you mature as a coach, and I think that's the path, right, to follow.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, that's part of that Shuhari concept as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do it by rote, do it with understanding, know when you don't need, right? These change, know when to break through. Yeah. Good Wikipedia article on that if anybody doesn't know that.
Yeah, we can put over there the link. It's a really nice concept, right? Okay, yeah. So I just have a couple of questions more so we can wrap it up. But definitely we will have a part 2, right?
I love it.
Because this is good. This is good. Okay. So, Ryland, what would be, if you could share, 2 stories? One, I would like to hear from you. What is what you consider the greatest or the biggest success of your career that you can remember, right away? Just a short story. And then the story number 2 would be, if you want to share, what could also be a big failure where you want to avoid the audience from going in there and just sharing a lesson learned, so they don't have to do it like you.
Okay, I know I had to answer this for someone else's interview lately, and I'm probably not going to come up with exactly the same, which is probably good. All right, I'm going to do the failure one first because it comes to mind, and then I'll think of a success.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, it kind of comes to. So the failure would be this, and remember I said that SAFe has a principle. I think it's from Deming, if you're wrong, that culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? Mm-hmm. Culture will also chew up and spit you out for breakfast if you don't understand the culture where you, okay? Mm-hmm. The biggest failure I had, and I'm grateful I had someone, a manager who was a friend and a good leader and a good mentor, help me grow through this problem. I had misunderstood the culture of the company I was working at. I was an employee at the time. And I, to make it short in a way, I thought I was being helpful and doing the right thing, collaborative with people, and flat out, I was totally wrong. I was not treating people the way this culture needed them to be treated. Purely cultural things like dropping what I was doing and helping them write, that kind of thing, versus asking them to please make an appointment. Like the company I'd come from before this one was more structured. You always ask someone to make an appointment. I didn't even think there was another way to do it. It's where I'd learned this. I was always doing that with other people. So I just expected people to do it with me. And it was never even a thought. Like if it was an emergency, we knew it. But barring like, house on fire kind of thing, this is the way you work for the most part. And the new company was a little scrappier than that. And you're expected to drop what you were doing and help someone at the time they needed it. And to my great mistake, I did catch that. And my manager sat me down, corrected me on it, and helped change the trajectory of my career. So I think I'm saying that to say two things to the audience listening. One, if anybody sits you down and gives you feedback about something, you need to respect the fact that they're taking the energy to do it and accept it with grace. Mm-hmm. You can disagree with it yourself later, you can whatever, but if it is well-intentioned from someone you trust, don't disregard the fact that they went to the trouble to have a difficult, they didn't enjoy doing, okay? Now, if you just have someone who's a jerk, that's another topic, but that's not what was happening here for me. I was genuinely missing the point. The person gave me examples, showed me the impact of my behavior, and I saw it, and I had a very difficult week, okay? We like to joke about that in my household. We're going to take you home, we're going to order Chinese food, we're going to apply a dog, and we're going to leave you on the couch for a while, okay? That's like the recipe for a bad day. I'm going to order Chinese food, put you on the couch, and apply a dog. Nice. 20 millicanines for 3 hours, that kind of thing. Okay, so that's a failure, and I'm grateful I was able to recover, and honestly, it makes me pay attention to culture a lot. There are other times that did trip me up until I realized the space, this blind spot existed in me. So I'm also going to tell you as an audience, if this is ever one of your things, don't be too hard on yourself if you don't catch it every time, but correct it as soon as you can. Whatever mistake, you made it for a long time, it'll take you a while to correct, okay?
Before jumping to the success story, just want to thank you for sharing this, and also share, I think that one very important thing about Agile, and we all know it, is getting feedback constantly from the customers. But there's probably another part involved in that, right? We also need to take feedback from our colleagues, from everyone around us in the ways that we're working, right? We even have a retrospective in Scrum for that, just specifically for that. And I think it's hard. And I mean, there are many techniques and there are many ways of doing it. And you have to be very mature or very assertive, or have some, way of controlling your emotions, to being able not only to receive feedback correctly, but also to give feedback, provide feedback is also very hard as a manager, right? So the tip that you're giving the audience to give clear, straightforward, sensitive, working feedback, and also receive and take it in that same way, and understand what you're doing, and be able to say, yes, I'm missing it, the point. I am doing things wrong. It's normally hard for humans, and it's hard for everyone, right? But as much as you can do it, then we will be a better version of ourselves, right? And if you, the persons looking at this, are not getting feedback and providing feedback, you need to start doing it as soon as possible, right? There are companies where I work, actually, we have these mechanisms so we can provide feedback to everyone around us, and they can provide feedback about us, right? And we take it very serious, and we have a process for that in place, right? We even get emails like, hey, you have not given feedback. Please provide feedback for your colleagues, or please get feedback. So it's a very important thing about growing, right? So I just wanted to add those 5 cents to your message. Absolutely. It was really good.
Absolutely. This has come up a lot lately. It might be, I don't know if it's the time of year or people are just looking at this differently. There's a difference between being abusive and giving feedback. There's a right and a wrong way. You probably, in your experience, I've always heard it called an SBI as an abbreviation, situation, behavior, impact. It's one of the easiest forms, and because you don't always want to wait till the end of the year. If you're a manager, or if you are a supervisee, you're the junior person here, and you want to ask for feedback, you might say to somebody, we're going to go into that critical meeting next. I would love a little feedback right after the meeting, whatever, right presently after, good, bad, or indifferent. I'd love a little feedback from you, just whatever you might have. You can ask for it ahead, and that invites someone to help you with it, especially if it's the thing you're working on and they know it, right? In that meeting, I saw your facilitation was good. You did shortcut, Dave, and I know Dave is a little sensitive to that. So I'm just saying you might want to next time just give Dave a little hand gesture of, hey, I got to move on. But that lets Dave finish his point. Otherwise, Dave can get a little buttered. But otherwise, you did great with that facilitation. I think we came out of that room with everything out. Short feedback, right? Timely is more effective. Telling you that 3 months after the meeting wouldn't be useful. And so two things I know you probably think of this too. Oh, darn it. Radical Candor by Kim Scott. It's kind of a famous book in this field, worth a read or a listen. And I heard a quote from Brene Brown just the other day. I was talking about this with somebody. Clarity is kind, in the sense of clear expectations, clear communication. Okay. Like, Hector, what I need from you is, we've been struggling with focus. I need this and this done by Wednesday. Can you get that done? Is it reasonable? Yes. Good. Don't let anything get in your way. Come to me if something does. I want you to stay on focus. I want to help. I've been clear about what the expectation is and how important it is. I wasn't mean. I was clear. There are skills to this. Okay? So everybody needs to have it to receive it. And so and it comes up a lot. I think maybe people are going through some stuff like, okay. Should I go to a success?
Yeah, please. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I guess this is going to be a little bit meta, and I don't mean I'm really happy. Remember I was talking about the career book and how I was trying to pass along some lessons from it, like things I had been taught. This kind of comes in the heading of, I'm really glad I noticed this, and noticing it let me put it in. I'd said, I'd gone to, I may have mentioned, I'd gone to grad school and I managed to not finish. I like to say this is my Agile thing. I have successfully left 3 graduate programs without finishing the degree, but it was faster each time. I discovered I didn't want to do this faster each time until finally the last one was, it only took me 2 weeks to discover I'm not doing this. This is the wrong thing for me to do. I'm not doing this. And I didn't incur any debt, and I didn't spend 6 months in school. So that was good. That was much faster than the other times, which took me a series and I didn't finish either. I guess I'm a little eclectic there. The thing I came to realize that I loved, or it's the thread I finally saw. I'm like, the thing I discovered what makes me happy in my work. And it's being part of this aha moment where somebody sees into their next thing, into the next level, solves a problem that they have been working on, achieves some new understanding for something that maybe had been blocking them or perplexing them or confusing. That I like being a part of that. I guess it's kind of my drug. I think that's a thing I love doing, and it makes me feel good that I've helped someone in that. And I'm lucky that I have found career where I get to do that consistently. Business analysis, I'm making complex concepts easily accessible for people, whether it's helping a business person codify what they want to do into a clean way, or I expand that in a useful way for development teams of like, here are the solution components we need to build and how I think they interact, and at least presenting it as a model that people could then agree or disagree with, because I'm not ultimately going to build it. It used to be me. I've done that in the past, but not now, right? Or agility, because some people have such a struggle with it. I know you must have seen this, right? Like, why are we doing retro every 2 weeks? Do you think everything? Well, Jill, let me ask you, is everything perfect? Is everything going great? Well, yeah. Okay, well then let's meet to talk about that fact, because that doesn't happen that much, right? Let's celebrate that fact. It can be a short retro, but I think it's good to say to each other, hey, everything went really well this last 2 weeks, don't you think? Like, there's always a learning aspect, an aha moment, and so forth in a lot of these spaces, whether it's agility, the act of doing and being agile in the service of a client, or teaching that client about agility or the BA stuff, or hoping anyway, and a little validation when people have read my books. They're like, yeah, I learned something new. So I call that success. And knowing that that's the thing I love lets me look for new ways to experience the places I can make that happen. So
That's awesome. And I'm glad for you. I think I share the same luck. So we're in the right track. Okay.
yeah.
Ryland, what products or projects are you currently working on? I saw your book is somehow new. Well, the book that you share with the other authors.
Sure.
So we will put the link over there. where can we will also put over there some links to your social networks and to follow up your work. But what are you doing? Where are you up to right now so they can follow you over there?
So I've been doing a couple of things. One, I think if there's a link to I think I have an author page on Amazon. It just happens to be that everything's there. The two books that are more in the past, the Agile and the Career book, are there. The Rock Crusher is also there, though that's published by the IIBA. There is a link there, and I should be connected on my profile page on Amazon. So that's one way. And the other stuff I'm doing these days is, at least currently, through Eventbrite. So if you go to rylandleyton.eventbrite.com, I do talks on different topics on a schedule that's changing. It's probably going to be 6 or 8 times a year, just public talks on different topics. They've covered Agile, they've covered business analysis, they covered a lot at the intersection of those things. And I usually talk about how they could be used for waterfall also. We're talking about culture issues and crisis and how you manage stuff in an upcoming one that may or may not be out before this podcast airs. With you, we'll see. But that's like one of the things we're talking about. It's like coming back to the consulting skills. And Hector, in your space, you've seen this too. Like when I talk about consulting mindset to people, one of the things I point out to consultants is, as an example of things we talk about, the only thing you ever control in any room is your own behavior. I can't make you think or say or do anything. I have no power to make that happen. I can only use my ability to influence yours and to show you a path if it's one you've asked me to help you with or whatever. So I look at it as, hey, how do you use your behavior, which is the thing you can control, in a positive way to help others achieve their goals? That's consulting in a sense, or part of the mind. So we talk about that as an example. So if you go to that Eventbrite link, I'll be posting stuff ahead. You can sign up to get the emails. I try to keep it a little light. I also do classes through there because that way I can do the same thing I've been talking about, teach the same class that you might go to at a conference for, a couple $1,000s or something. I do for way less when I get to teach those. They vary. It's always this, and other stuff. My website, rylandleyton.com, very stale, but in need of a refresh. I'm committing to do it by the end of 2020. I have no better horizon. And then LinkedIn. We'll post my LinkedIn thing there, but I'm probably one of the only Ryland Leytons out there. Please feel free to look that up and connect. And I post the other stuff I'm doing on there. And that's kind of it. That's what I'm doing. I'm, having gotten through the book, which was a lot of work this last year. This year, I'm mostly focusing on getting to do those talks and occasional things people ask me to do with teaching or consulting if it comes. That's where I'm at. I take a little time off from my day job. I take a PTO day and do something with the team if it comes up. That's it.
That's great, man. So then we will have the links put over there in the description of the video or maybe in the comments. It has been a pleasure talking to you. I'm hoping that everyone in the audience liked this conversation as much as I did. And we will have a part 2, definitely. We will dig down into some topics, probably the book, right? We will we'll put more into pressure into SAFe, like we did. And let's see how it goes. So, Ryland, thanks a lot for this conversation. Thank you for your time and talk to you soon, man.
Thanks, Hector. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.